but the vision of the organization is based on the cantons or entities, and they're not equally developed. So how do you actualize access to healthcare to all people if you have such a decentralization of the health services, both financing, delivery system, and so on and so on? The other thing is the hospitals that we inherited were created for previous administration. They were not created for this division of labor. 10 cantons. The smallest one has 22,000 people, I believe. They have a hospital, 3-story hospital, 17 specialists. Last time I was there was 2 months ago. They had 2 patients. Yeah. Wow, 2 patients. 22,000 people, what can you do? And then the tertiary services were concentrated in Sarajevo and Banja Luka, which are the 2 big centers. But then it started in a different way. So each canton wanted to bring its own mayor clinic to be developed in their little society, driven by medical needs, not by the systems people who would organize. So what I would like to offer you is some experience on what's happening in the Middle East and in your neighboring countries, just to get the sense on the health financing, where the money is coming from, because the money will be the driver of your equity. You would certainly have a huge challenge to develop your institutions. Ministry of Health, Health Assurance Fund, Public Health Institutes, Agency for Quality Assurance, accreditation, licensing, all of that. Association of Physicians, which is extremely strong in the Middle East, particularly in Lebanon, Jordan. Order of Physicians, their building is probably the same size as the World Bank. However, Lebanon has only 50% of people that have health insurance. Half of them. However, they have 18 times more CAT scans per person than in the United States. So, if we are really talking about equity and access to healthcare, we have to look at the health systems. Is this conference the right venue to talk about that? Is it premature? Probably not. I think we have to be ready now for thinking how your system is going to be developed in the future, so that, God willing, tomorrow we will have a peace. All forces will be ready to step in and help with the development. Goran is a person who was actually in the front lines of medical services as a physician, as a surgeon, as a public health specialist. But then, as soon as the war stopped, he went to the ministry and he started organizing this community-based care, and he moved the things. Why am I singling him out? Because his background is medical, not public health, not health administration, not health systems, but we had to learn as we were going. The mental health program that he was running, which was unique in the world, and that is a lesson that certainly we all can learn from, and very relevant to Syria, and also physical rehabilitation, community-based. We had, I think, 18 organizations doing different medical rehabilitation programs at the time. Training for family medicine was ranging from 3 years specialization in the Canadian curriculum to every last Saturday in the month we would meet for 3 months, and then you're a specialist in family care. So the difference was huge. The system was not there. Slowly, the quality and the power of the authority of the government put it under control and unify the country in terms of standards, quality, and so on and so on. And there's a lot to show these days on the achievements that this country has made. Some mistakes, particularly on decentralization and equity, but if Syria is what I believe it is egalitarian society, to help the poor, help everybody, and believes in universal health coverage, and that's what I have seen SAMS are doing. They're treating everybody, regardless whether they're rich or poor, or one ethnic group or religious group, whoever. That's what we are striving for. We didn't achieve that 100%, still a long way to go, but that's something that is the base for thinking of the future system. So I picked up health financing just because it's impossible to cover all aspects of the health system right now. It would take us probably a week or 2 weeks to go through all things. Health financing is one of the control knobs that you can work on. Provided payment mechanism matters because it depends how the providers will behave, depending on how they're paid, not necessarily all the time how much they're paid. Regulatory framework, micro and macro organization internally for the health facilities, as well as referrals, primary care, secondary care, tertiary care, and then you have this public health persuasion. So, towards universal health coverage, more value for money in the health systems. So, when we are talking about health financing, there are really two parts. One is where do you collect money and where do you spend it, right? So, there are differences in opinions. Some people call it in the United States financing is the revenue side, and provider payment mechanism and allocation is another. But for purpose of today's discussion, let's put it under one umbrella. Revenues of health services and risk pooling and funding. So if you're talking about Syria in the future and you're thinking of private health insurance or social health insurance, that might be difficult, particularly in the beginning. Probably what you're looking at is general tax revenues or general revenues from the government or whatever authority you will have in whatever area you will have. And the next thing is really who is purchasing the health services. Might look strange that at this moment we are talking about these two functions, but this is the future of any health system. If you don't have the risk pooling, you're not talking about universal health coverage. You're talking either private insurance for rich and then something for poor. You're creating two-tier society. There is two-tier society, access to healthcare in every country. Don't worry. Rich will find a way. They will go to Germany or Sweden or the United States and get their healthcare. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about general population, particularly about the poor. And then, purchasing of the healthcare. Guys, if you pay salaries, there are very perverse incentives for the health providers. They don't care how many patients you have, they get their salary, the quality is not on their agenda, right? So it's very important to establish this baseline on who is purchaser, who is provider, what are you contracting for in health services. Equity of services and financing, financial protection, so you don't have to sell your car or your house or whatever if you're sick. Efficiency and a good quality. So, overview of health financing, we could really divide it into general revenue collection for health, whether it comes from general taxes, compulsory taxes, voluntary premiums, mostly for private insurance, or user fees, right? On the risk pooling we are talking about the central government budget, or social health insurance, or voluntary private insurance. So far, everything clear? And on purchasing, whether you're purchasing for public and private, basically you need a purchaser to buy the services, and you need a provider. And there has to be a contract. What are you buying from whom? Only inputs-based financing is not going to give you efficiency, equity, or quality. So we are really looking at these goals. Service use relative to needs, financial protection, equity, and financing and efficiency. Now, what is happening in the world globally? Where's the money coming from for health system, for any country? And you will see the difference between West and less developed countries. You have Sudan, Afghanistan, where most of the money comes actually out of pocket, right? And you have UK, Thailand, Malawi, where most of the money comes from the government, and very little out of pocket. What does that mean? It means that if you have a health protection, health financing protection, you have the same access both for rich and the poor. If your system depends on out-of-pocket payment, we are not talking about equity, right? The rich will pay. The poor will either not use the service or use the low-quality services. I'm not sure I have data for Bosnia because it's very complicated to get it. We have a national health accounts looking at it, but I believe about 40 or 50% is out-of-pocket payment, which shows that we are not necessarily equitable society. Okay. Now, I was wondering should I put this slide or not, and I thought why not. This is the latest data that we have at the bank, looking at all MENA countries, how much they are spending. MENA is Middle East and North African countries. How much they are spending for healthcare. And one thing is clear, not much. Compared to United States, where they spend around 70% of GDP for healthcare, this is extremely high, to Thailand that is gone down to 3 or 4%, so Kazakhstan that is 2.8% of GDP. That's very low. Your neighboring countries are really in this range here, where not much money has been spent for healthcare or not enough. Now, put yourself in the shoes of Minister of Finance. Demands are huge. You have to build your economy, your roads, your farms, your whatever. How much money can you allocate for healthcare? It's important, no question. But where do you prioritize? Do you prioritize putting money into health or into chicken farm or food production farm or roads or factories or whatever? So these are very tough decisions you have. What we had in our country, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, was a mix. We had a huge influx of money from foreign donations, from foreign investors, from some $5-6 billion was the initial plan to rebuild the economy and partly pay for the healthcare. And that helped. But with that, we had to pay the tax, which is high debt of the country, loans with interest rate, loans without interest rate, diversity in administration, different priorities. I mentioned 18 different programs for family medicine, for mental health, for physical rehabilitation, and so on and so on. Slowly the government control and the authority started to take over. And I remember Goran actually tearing apart one of the projects that was made by one of our colleagues, saying, "This is crap, we don't want this. Next." That was a sign that finally there's a strategy, that there's a plan on where to go and how to think about future health system in our country, and that the government is taking control. With the World Bank, we're a development bank, and we really, we are actually a development fund, while the IMF is development bank. We don't operate for profit, but we support the government. We give the money to the government to implement their programs. Compared to what we had at the beginning was hundreds of NGOs being funded by the donors to support their bad projects. And that made some good, but also it had some downsides because we didn't have a standardized policy, standardized clinical protocols, treatment guidelines, and so on. These slides show that your neighboring countries are really not investing enough as they need to in healthcare. And beyond physical rehabilitation, beyond plastic and reconstructive surgery that will be needed in Syria because of so many injuries and secondary prevention. Basically, I want these people to be active and productive and be able to work in the future and independent. There are huge uncommunicable diseases that you will have to worry about. MENA is, as you know, probably with the highest rate of diabetes and hypertension in the world, ranging from 7% of the population to 22, 23 in Saudi Arabia. just a comparison, the United States spent 23% of their resources just to manage diabetes. That's about $300 billion a year. So if you want to cover both acute needs, post-conflict, war victims, rehabilitation, basic services, you also have to think about chronic non-communicable diseases that will be creeping out. Okay, so the next slide. Now, if we look how the health systems are financed in the region, your neighbors are not doing quite well. Usually WHO is talking about less than 20% of total spending for health to be out of pocket. And Jordan is here, Libya is here, Emirates are here, Saudi is here, Tunisia, West Bank and Gaza, look at that, 40%, right? Djibouti, Iraq, Morocco, Yemen, almost 70, 80%. Probably now in Syria it's 100% out of pocket, with the exception of donations and free services that NGOs are providing. But I don't believe there's much of the government funding going on. Why is this bad? Well, post-conflict priorities in productive sector, economic development will take away resources from health. And health will be exposed to lower investments, that's for sure. But you have to do two things. One is you have to prioritize and plan. What kind of system do you want to have? Both from financing side to delivery side. Do you want to build tertiary services with a liver transplant and things like that? Or you want to do diabetes control, hypertension, very different system. One is primary care based, the other one is tertiary care based. You know, when we are talking post-conflict, when we are talking conflict, we are usually talking about surgery. That's a small part, secondary care, but it's not primary care. So where is your game is really a question. And usually the service delivery side is driven by medical society, which tend to go for more expensive and highly complicated services. What Bosnia did is they oriented their SAMS to the primary care, much more than the secondary and tertiary care. So they did family doctors, they did primary care, they did community-based rehabilitation, community-based mental health, physical rehabilitation, and they did it wonderfully. One of the best countries in the world. Syria probably will not be immune from influence from the neighboring country and their system. So that's one challenge that we will have and have to rethink in much more deep way on how to go about it and what the priorities are. There has to be a national plan. So out-of-pocket payments, just to reiterate, is really not good for universal health. And that thing has to be monitored. How much people pay, for what they pay, how the money is spent, where the money is coming from, and these functions of risk pooling and purchasing of the healthcare have to be prioritized. Compromise equity and access, because service depends on ability to pay. Some people cannot afford the payment. People at least pay higher and higher share of their income. They became poor. Once you're in the poverty cycle, it's very hard to get out. You don't get education. Education leads to poverty. You're spinning around at the bottom of the food chain, and that's where the problem starts for the whole society. I think in the United States, actually, the main reason for getting into poverty is the healthcare. People can't pay, they sell their house, lose their job, the cost is high. And
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
yeah. So what should public resource allocation finance? Public goods, prevention, training of health and human resources, and that's a huge challenge for Syria. And not just for Syria, but particularly now, because of the lack of physicians and nurses and medical staff to do it. And we spent some time yesterday talking about research and development of your own system. subsidize the poor and low-income families. Oops. What did I do? There's a basic services for all, everybody that has access to these services. And risk pooling scheme to incentivize people for insuring against catastrophic health expenditures. On resource allocation, once you collect your money from different tax, from general revenue, from whatever, which are less progressive, regressive taxes usually, the question is how do you allocate your money and for what? Is to provide individuals with packet of essential services. This is the key. If you do not guarantee to everybody the package of basic services, you will create hope that everybody has unlimited budget for healthcare. That's what happens in most of the post-Soviet countries. You know, that's what happens here. The basic package is generous. It includes everything except cosmetic surgery, I think, and a few other things. That's not affordable. So it's better to focus on few things, do them right, and prevent people getting into poverty because of catastrophic expenditures. And prioritization is necessary. So we are not talking just here technical decisions, we are talking really political decisions. This is very sensitive, and even Obamacare and reforms in UK under Margaret Thatcher, and every single health reform is not just technical, it's also political. Who pays what gets and what. Using effective resources is very important. For equity reasons, government has to finance a significant part of total health expenditures and reduce out-of-pocket expenditures. And reliance on out-of-pocket expenditures is not going to take you very far. Again. Sorry.
An ethical committee to state what can be done, what shouldn't be done, as opposed to having open access versus limited access to everybody. Maximize your dollars for your return.
Yeah, give all the questions.
Yeah, let's get 3
That's great.
points.
Yeah.
You can answer.
The question is, how do you guard against corruption in those governments?
Good place to ask that question.
Experts say that part of the solution to the refugee situation in Lebanon, Turkey and Jordan would be about universal healthcare coverage for those populations as well as the Syrian population. Is that just idealistic, or do you think it's feasible?
Okay, let me answer these 3 questions because the last one is very interesting. Look, as I said, deciding on what services and what healthcare system you should have is not just technical decision. It's not decision of ethical committee. It's also a political process that drives from the values that the people have. The good news is that Syria believes in equity. That all people should have access to healthcare. More developed you become, there will be thoughts, this is my money, I do with it whatever I want, and I want the best healthcare for myself and my family. I don't have to pay for others. So that notion of equity should be the driving force. But then thinking that the resources are limited, what is the best use of these things is very difficult. You have a patient that needs liver transplant, for example. Costs what, $1 million, costs a couple $100,000 more, depends on the longevity of life after that. Or getting your kids immunized. Which one would you choose? And it's individual versus collective. It's one person versus other. So decisions in public health are really about who's going to live and who's going to die.
That's why
Tough question. Then ethics. Well, in the bank we have this flagship course on health financing and sustainable reforms that I recommend to everybody. It's based on the book by 4 professors from Harvard Program for International Health, Bill Shaw, Mark Roberts, Peter Berman, and Michael Reich, that basically argues that there's no right or wrong answer. You know, in one society, This is my money, why should I pay for somebody else? In the other society, greatest good for greatest number. In another society, whatever wise man sitting under the tree says is the right thing, that's the right thing to do. So it's a very complex situation. An ethics committee depends really on the value of money. So if you use the opportunity to build this up and bring the egalitarian system into place, you will build the middle class. Bigger the middle class, faster economic recovery. Lower the middle class, more poverty, extreme richness is not going to lead you to economic recovery. That's at least not possible. How do you guard against the corruption? Usually at the beginning, you don't have much. In the recovery period, the corruption really starts after that. And it depends on the administrative structure. If you decentralize too much, like we did, you are opening door for decentralized corruption. If you centralize too much, you're opening door for centralized corruption. So you have to choose between two. And guys, there's no one country that is bulletproof against corruption.
It's multiple choice is supposed to have 5 options.
It's the degree that you're really looking at, and the transparency of the doing business is, and accountability is the first and the most important. If you don't have a system of accountability for the results, then you're basically covering whatever is happening underneath.
But as a World Bank, you have a system.
No, the World Bank is financing government programs, and our advantage is to show one country what other country has done, where it failed and where it succeeded. That's basically what we are doing. In the typical World Bank finance project, where you have a financing input, yes, we have this. We have overview of the procurement, blah, 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 blah. But down the road, it's not ending the corruption in the country. It's just ending the limited funds that are provided by the World Bank.
1 minute.
What we are trying to do now is to pay for results. So if you have your patients that have hemoglobin A1C below 7, that's how you should be paid. If you have your hypertension patients that have below 140/90, that's the reward that you should get. How you get there, your problem.
Pay by performance.
Pay by performance. So you will see a lot more shifting to outcomes and performance-based payment rather than inputs-based payment. And then the last question is really tricky. In Lebanon, we have a project that is about $78 million that is covering Lebanese population only, not Syrian refugees. And that's something that is bothering us pretty much because as the Syrian refugees moved to Lebanon, the resources shifted towards providing care for them because the resources come from UN and other agencies to take care of the refugees. Lebanon had, before the crisis, only 50% health insurance coverage. And not everybody had access to health care. The cost of treatment now in Lebanon has gone up for local population because the doctors shifted to take care of the refugees. So supply and demand. And that has affected domicile population. Now, if you have a universal coverage in Lebanon, both for domicile and local, that would lower the cost, increase reduce the demand, increase the supply side for both. But putting that finance together in this moment where we really don't know what the solution will be, where these refugees will be in the next 5 years, is a huge challenge. It means that we will have to put our resources with the government resources, with the UN resources, with the private resources.
Thank you a lot for that. We'll conclude, move to the second speaker, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.